All right, my friends, welcome. I'm the Zim. I stream games, and I'm gonna teach you in this video how to make an overlay for your stream if you want to try to do something like that. I've been starting to get into making overlays on my streams. I used to not do that. A little bit of philosophy to start off with here is I used to think the video needed to be as big as possible, like the game video, when for my streams, I found people don't really watch the video in that way. They maybe are listening to it while they're playing, they're doing those things. So like the video of the game itself, I don't feel like needs to be the whole size of the screen. And we'll talk about it in relation to vertical video as well in a second. But so I've been changing up and playing around more with your video sizes and things like that. The video that I show you, like there's some people that are into green screen, we'll do that in the corner. There are some people that are into like the VTuber style streaming where it's just a little character talking. I personally think it's best to show your face. So, and that's my opinion. You can have your own philosophy on it. So I like to show my video, and I also like to show my video with as much of the background as possible so that my audience can get a sense of who I am and what my lifestyle is like. I also make artwork and different things. So I know it's different for a lot of people. A lot of people probably want to hide their background if they're in their bedrooms and things like that. So that can make a big difference to what you show. But I actually really like to show my life and my background. But I think it's important to kind of have an aesthetic about your background. Anyways, I'm getting more into philosophy of streaming than showing overlays. So let's get into showing you how to make this overlay. I'm going to jump over. So before we jump over, a couple things you'll need. Some graphic making programs such as Photoshop or Illustrator. That's what I'm going to be using. But I'm sure you can use Procreate or Clip Studio or the numerous other like digital art making programs out there. The important thing you want to know is exporting as PNG. If you're very new to this, exporting as PNG is what you want to know. And so make sure you're exporting as PNG. And what that does is it allows these holes to be created. So in this particular overlay right now, I have 3 holes. I have a hole below me. I have the hole that I'm in right here. And I have a hole where my video is. And in this particular case, what's above me is not a hole. Well, it's kind of a hole. And what's both on the left side over here, or right side for you, is also not a hole. The graphics are part of the overlay, but you can choose to make that graphic, you can make that a hole and put the graphic on your like streaming program or not. So the other thing I'm using, I use Streamlabs OBS, but this could work for regular OBS, and I think there's other streaming software out there that you can use. But again, the important part is PNG files. So let's jump over to a digital creation tool. In this case, we're going to use Illustrator. All right, so we're in Illustrator now. I'm going to put my head down in the corner. So what you want to do is set up a document. You could be any program. Like I said, it could be Illustrator, it could be Photoshop. So with Streamlabs, I can stream vertical and horizontal. So I have an artboard for both vertical and horizontal. And so depending on your program, your vertical, like horizontal is the same for YouTube, Twitch, all the places. It's 1920 by 1080, right? 1920 wide by 1080 tall. With the vertical video, it's a little bit different. And for me, it works out to be 720 by 1280. If I make my file 720 by 1280, I can just drag and drop it straight into Streamlabs and it'll be the right size, and then it'll send it out to, you know, TikTok and all those places perfectly. I won't have to resize my overlay if I do 720 by 1080 or 720 by 1280. All right, so there we go. Let's just start. I'm not going to talk too much about the vertical overlay because you can apply all this strategy to it once you learn it. We're going to focus on the horizontal overlay. So the first thing that I do is I make some guides. And I have a layer over here, a layer. I have a bunch of layers of what I've been working on. On my right side, I make some guides. And in this case, I made guides such that they are these guides. So let me get rid of these ones real quick. I'll talk about these guides that are kind of like the rough border of what it is that I'm making. So this is the rough border of that original, of that overlay you saw before. So I'll show that again real quick. So this is the overlay. This is the rough border of this overlay. I started to sketch it out, right? And I found like what size should I make these, you know, dividers between different sections. I make them 24 pixels wide. So these are 24 pixels wide is what I decided to do. So once we kind of decided, so now you know that's one thing, 24 pixels wide. But before I even do that, I actually start somewhere even before that. So with my 1080 but 1920 by 1080, what I typically do is I drag out, I'll just stay on my guides level here. I'll go to my rectangle tool and I'll either click once or drag out. I'll just do it the click once way. I'll put another object that is 1920 by 1080. That's my object right there. So that's the same size, and that's the size of your video, right? So then if you manipulate the size of this, and depending on the program you're working with, changing the size will be different. In Illustrator, you got to hold shift and change it so it stays the same ratio. But depending on your program, you could change this ratio, and then you decide how much of the real estate of my screen do I want to take up my video, my game? How much of the real estate of my screen do I want to take up my game? And you can make that decision. Maybe you make it, I don't know, half and half, kind of like you have one here and then you can make another one that's up above it, the same size. You could do something like that. I've done videos, overlays like that. But in this particular case, I decided that I liked it. So I took up that much space. Or the lighter rectangle is my gameplay, and the darker rectangle is my video of my face. And so that's what I decided to lay out. And I was thinking like I could put up above it, I'll put some information around and just divide up the screen differently like this. I was experimenting with a little bit of a different layout. You know, I've done it in the past where I've done a really small video of my face in the left like corner, and then the larger video of the gameplay in the lower part. I've also done it with dividing my video and my face perfectly even. So my gameplay was above and my video of my face was below, and then I had just other information like the chat box and things along the sides. But let's go back to the one we're working on right now. So I decided that that's where I wanted it. And then I go and use these other guides to decide, okay, this is how much kind of space. So when these guides are gone, you know, I'm gonna put the video in this spot, but sometimes it doesn't always line up perfectly even. So if you give yourself a little bit of room to cover it up, that 24 pixels gives you some room to manipulate underneath it. So because it's gonna be hiding, the video is gonna be kind of hiding, the edges of the videos are gonna be hiding underneath that. So okay, so then I go, you know, that's great. That's what I want then. That's the layout I want. I'm gonna have an open space for my face, an open space for my gameplay, and then some other spots for other ideas. And then on a new layer, and I'm gonna make a brand new layer for us, on a new layer above this, once I have this set up, I'll lock this level so it doesn't get messed up or anything. I'll go with my tool and just kind of redraw in these boxes, just like this. Let me change the color so it's easy to see. Let's go with, I don't know, a light green color. It's kind of ugly, but whatever. So we have this color. So now I'm gonna redraw these boxes with this light green color. There's lots of ways to do it. You can redraw each one or you can drag in. And luckily with the way these programs are, usually they're pretty smart and they snap to the sizes. So now that I've got them all drawn in there, I select all of them. Make sure everything's locked. I select this, so I locked everything but what I did. And in my case, I wanted the corner. So this is where I can manipulate the corners. So I will drag and like, maybe I want my corners extra rounded like so. All right, so we need to fill in that white area with the border, right? I'm realizing this is more complicated than I imagined at first, but this is the steps that I do. So hopefully you understand a little, this is, you know, you're gonna have to understand a little bit about your program in order to create these, but just depending on how you're creating the program. So I created this and I want everything that's brown and white to be one solid thing. So what I do then is I go on that same layer, I go and draw another rectangle behind everything. I'm gonna change the color so we can see it really well. I'm gonna drag that one to the bottom of everything. I'm gonna make, my guides are locked, but I'm also gonna get rid of my guides. So now this is kind of, that dark green is what we're trying to create, and we want holes for everything else. So in Illustrator, you do this process called minus front with your Pathfinder tool. You could do it with an eraser tool. So basically, you create a whole space on your artboard, and then you take out sections. And I'm gonna take out these sections by using the minus front tool with my Pathfinder. So I'm gonna go to View. In this case, there's our window, Pathfinder. There's lots of ways to get to this. So again, and then minus front. So now it's just this object. That's where I can put all my all the videos inside it. White background on Illustrator will not appear in a PNG, so the artboard is white, so you don't have to worry about it. In Photoshop, if you're working in something like Photoshop, you want to have the checkerboard background. So let me bring up so like in Photoshop, an overlay, well, you'll want to have this checkerboard background in order to export it, because that's what's going to be clear when you do the PNG, and then your video can be underneath of it. So keep that in mind in Photoshop, or possibly other programs. You'll have that checkerboard background. All right, so that's like the technique I use to create the holes. All right, let's pause for a moment here, because that's my technique to create the holes, like I was saying. However, I just want, like, I think the curved, rounded kind of shapes look nice, but you could totally, like, it could be all additive rather than subtractive. Like I did this process of taking out things. You can make your, like, if we go back just to the guides themselves, like this could be your overlay. And let's say, you know, same kind of thing. You just want to make sure, like, you could export. You don't have to unite this or anything. You don't have to combine. Like once this art is created like this, you can export right now as a PNG, and there will be holes where all the white is, and you can put things underneath it on your program. However, I did more with mine. I wanted more things. You could add other shapes. You could add other shapes. And cover up things, like what you can add shapes to your design and manipulate them. You can be all additive. It doesn't need to be subtracted. Okay, hopefully that's clear. You just got to make sure there are holes. You retain holes where you want the holes. Let's go now to my process again, which is like this. So what I did was, so I created the holes, and on this layer, I made myself a new layer that's just for YouTube, and I said, I want, in this bottom section, I want an image, and this upper section, I want an image. And there's a couple of processes on how to do that. I mean, the bottom line is you can take an image, put it in there, and then move it underneath, and it'll be that. In this case, I have a clipping mask, or yeah, I have a clipping mask on it. So I have a layer that's making it a little bit darker than the original. So it's, again, techniques that you're gonna need to know how to do. I'm not doing everything with this video. I'm just showing you essentially how to make the holes. You want the holes, right? All right, another quick pause here. So again, this overlay, I decided to put images connected to the overlay. The images that you see on the screen could also be put in Streamlabs or your program. So you could just make the border, drag that into Streamlabs, and then put more artwork that you'll hide underneath your border as you want. It's just a matter of how you want to approach making your overlays and borders and things like that. So I knew that this is what I want, and I kind of like it. In Streamlabs, there's a list of a whole bunch of documents, of items, of files on your program, and I kind of like it if there's less of them there. So if I had to hide and do things, I'm not searching through so many. So that might be something to consider. So you made the holes. However you made the holes. In this case with Illustrator, I made the holes using the Pathfinder tool and a little bit of process. So I made these holes in the overlay. you could make, like I said, you could make a file that's 1080 by 1920 and just use an eraser and erase, or use something like a selection tool and delete out the holes. So it's really how you make the holes is up to you, but I like Illustrator because it's more precise. Like I can get very precise about where I do things. Okay, so in this case, I decided that I want this art file to be under this section on the top left and this art file to be under the section on the top right. I wanted holes because I'm going to put video on this bottom left. I'm going to put my face video in the second one up, and I'm going to put the game video in the upper right. So I decided that. Plus, I wanted an overlay, right? So for my particular overlay, so how did I create the yellow drip, right? I wanted this gradient with yellow drip. So I made this foundation, the foundation of my holes first. And I said, okay, after I make the foundation of my holes, I need now to create this kind of drippy on top of it. So I just traced, I used the brush tool to draw, and let me change it color so we can see it really well. I used the brush tool and I just drew the drip where I wanted it all the way around my object. And I had to do the same technique where I created one object like that. That's not, I mean, accurate to what I did because it didn't hold the drips. But then I drew the inner hole here for this one, and I drew an inner hole here for this one. And I had to do some techniques where I had to make sure these were closed paths and different things. So again, you're gonna need to understand your tool and how to do it. But essentially, I drew the drips, I created more holes, and eventually it looked like this, right? It looked like this. And I didn't like how Illustrator created the shadow, like the beveling and shadowing. So I took this object, I copied it, and I went over to my Photoshop, and I went and pasted in my into Photoshop here. I pasted it into Photoshop, and I used the layer styles in Photoshop with bevel and emboss and gradient overlay to create the effect of what you're seeing here. I had to rasterize layer style so it retains all the gradient. I copied it. So Control A, Control C, copy, select all, copy, went back to Illustrator, and then Control V, pasted it into Illustrator, and then put it where I wanted it. And that doesn't really matter, but and then in Illustrator, I used the Illustrator to create the drop shadow that I wanted. So I go to View, or I go to Effects, Stylize, Drop Shadow, and then it's already set where I wanted it. So I hit OK. So now that has a drop shadow. So we have to remember though, that in order to create the effect that I made in my video, in this video, the text that you see down there is made in Streamlabs. And the flags are a separate art file. So in order to sandwich the flags and the text between the background image and the drips, I had to export these separately as PNGs. So as you can see here, so I put this overlay above my videos, but below the text and the flags. And then, but I also have, because I want the drip to go over, and right up here is where the chat box is. So there's a chat box up here that you can't see right now because I'm not live, so you can't see it. But that also is underneath the drip. So I needed to export the drip separately. So I'm gonna go back to Illustrator, and I got it set up here so it's just the drip with my shadow and everything ready for export. So I just gotta take this, I go File, Export As, and then I go PNG, use artboards. I want the first artboard, PNG, in my overlays folder, export, hit OK. So now you can't see this because it's off screen, but I'm gonna go to where I saved that PNG file, drag it in and drop it in to my Streamlabs file, and now it's on the top. So they put it on the, oops, that's not one. They put it on the top. I have to hide it from the vertical video. They give you the option to hide between vertical and horizontal video. You can't see that on the screen, unfortunately. But then I gotta just drag this to the right spot, a little bit lower, because there are some things that I want to be above everything, such as something like this. This is above everything. So the layers and how you layer them in your program is important. That's how I made the overlay. Let's go back a little bit and talk a little bit more than how I arrange it in Streamlabs. So let's hide everything again. And then, so this right down in the bottom left, this is a video that I made in Final Cut Pro, and I put that in there. I made it the size I want out of Final Cut Pro, made a video. Where my face is my camera video, my Sony camera that's recording me, and then the game video is up here in the upper right, and that's that. So I arranged those where I wanted them, but I usually have this in there first. So when I grab like my video, I can place it in where I want, and it'll kind of show me there's guidelines you can't see on screen that helps me arrange it where I want it. There's a little, bounding box around the video, and I can drag it and then hide it underneath the borders that I made and those kind of things. And then once I got everything situated and layered like I want, I can turn on all the elements of my overlay to be like so. All right. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat about how to update your overlays. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it if you feel like there was something I didn't explain well enough. All right. As always, be loving, kind, and patient. Peace, my friends. Bye.